Most people work hard, follow the rules, stay disciplined for decades, and still never experience real financial freedom. Not because they are careless or irresponsible, but because the system they operate within quietly rewards stability while discouraging escape. The middle class is not a trap built from failure, it is a structure built from comfort, predictability, and habits that feel correct. Hello, I'm Max, and if this content helps you better understand how money works in real life, I invite you to leave a like and subscribe. Here, we talk about finances calmly and with perspective, focusing on how long-term patterns shape outcomes far more than single decisions. The middle class is often presented as a destination rather than a phase. Stable income, predictable routines, manageable expenses, and gradual improvements create a sense of arrival. Life works, bills are paid, progress appears steady. Yet beneath this surface stability lies a quiet limitation. The system is designed to maintain balance, not to generate momentum. One of the defining characteristics of the middle class is dependence on consistency. Income is tied closely to time and effort, and expenses are structured around that income. As long as everything continues as expected, the system feels safe. The problem is that safety and scalability rarely coexist. When growth depends entirely on continuous effort, freedom remains limited. Many people assume that earning more money is the solution. However, income growth alone often reinforces the same structure. Raises lead to lifestyle adjustments. New conveniences replace old ones. Responsibilities expand to match earnings. The result is a larger version of the same system, not a fundamentally different one. The ceiling moves slightly higher, but it remains firmly in place. This pattern is reinforced by social norms. Responsible behavior is praised. Predictability is rewarded. Deviating from established paths feels unnecessary or even reckless. Over time, this creates a powerful incentive to remain within familiar boundaries. The cost of stepping outside them is framed as risk, while the cost of staying inside them remains invisible. Another factor is time allocation. Middle-class life is often fully occupied by maintenance. Work, commuting, obligations, and routines consume most available energy. Activities that could reshape the future, learning new skills, building assets, experimenting with ideas, are postponed, not because they lack value, but because they lack urgency. The present absorbs all attention, leaving little room for long-term leverage. Psychologically, this creates a subtle form of acceptance. When life is comfortable enough, dissatisfaction feels unjustified. Ambition is reframed as greed. Curiosity is replaced by caution. Over time, the desire for more control quietly fades, replaced by a focus on preserving what already exists. Importantly, none of this implies that the middle class is a mistake. It provides stability, dignity, and structure. The issue arises when stability becomes the endpoint rather than the foundation. Without intentional efforts to build leverage, assets, skills, systems that operate independently of time, the middle class becomes a holding pattern rather than a stepping stone. Escaping the middle class does not require extreme behavior or dramatic risk. It requires recognizing that the habits which maintain stability are rarely the same ones that create independence. This realization is uncomfortable, because it challenges deeply ingrained beliefs about responsibility, safety, and success. For years, the difference between those who escape and those who remain looks minimal. Lives appear similar. Progress feels comparable. Only later does the divergence become clear. One path leads to increasing flexibility and control. The other requires constant effort just to maintain position. Understanding this distinction is the first step. Not to reject stability, but to see it clearly for what it is. A base, not a destination. One of the main reasons most people remain in the middle class is not a lack of effort, intelligence, or discipline, but a set of habits that are perfectly suited for maintaining stability and poorly suited for creating upward movement. These habits are reinforced daily, rewarded socially, and rarely questioned, because they work well enough to keep life predictable. Middle-class behavior is often centered around optimization rather than transformation. People learn how to manage what they have, not how to change the structure that defines their limits. Budgets are refined, expenses are controlled, and income is carefully allocated. These skills are valuable, but they operate inside an existing framework. They protect against chaos, yet they rarely introduce leverage. A clear example appears in how risk is perceived. Middle-class thinking treats risk as something to be avoided rather than understood. Decisions are filtered through the question of safety. Will this disrupt my routine? Will this reduce short-term certainty? As a result, many opportunities are dismissed early, not because they are reckless, but because they introduce temporary discomfort or ambiguity. Over time, this creates a narrow decision-making range that limits growth. Career choices often reflect this mindset. Stability, predictability, and incremental advancement are prioritized over roles that offer learning curves or asymmetric upside. While this approach reduces volatility, it also caps long-term potential. Income grows slowly and predictably, but rarely scales beyond the limits of time and availability. Years of consistency produce security, not independence. Another deeply ingrained habit is lifestyle alignment. Expenses are structured to match income closely, leaving little margin for strategic allocation. When income increases, obligations tend to increase alongside it. Housing, transportation, and conveniences expand to fill available resources. This creates the appearance of progress, while reinforcing dependence on steady cash flow. The system becomes harder to exit precisely because it feels comfortable. Time usage plays an equally important role. Most available energy is spent maintaining daily life. Work consumes the best hours. Evenings are reserved for recovery. Weekends are used to reset. There is little leftover capacity for long-term projects that do not deliver immediate rewards. Over years, this pattern quietly compounds. Effort is expended continuously, yet structural change remains minimal. Social reinforcement strengthens these patterns. Responsible behavior is praised. Playing it safe is encouraged. Questioning the standard path often triggers skepticism or concern from peers. This creates subtle pressure to conform, even when the path leads to average outcomes. Over time, ambition is reframed as risk, and curiosity is replaced with caution. Psychologically, this leads to a form of quiet resignation. When life is functional and stress is manageable, dissatisfaction feels unjustified. People learn to suppress the sense that something is missing. The desire for more control or flexibility fades, replaced by gratitude for stability. While gratitude is valuable, it can also become a mechanism that discourages growth. None of this means the middle class is inherently flawed. It provides structure, reliability, and protection from chaos. The problem arises when these qualities become the ultimate goal rather than the starting point. Without intentional efforts to build assets, scalable skills, or systems that operate independently of time, stability hardens into a ceiling. Those who eventually move beyond the middle class do not reject these habits outright. They reinterpret them. Discipline becomes a tool for long-term allocation rather than short-term balance. Stability becomes a base from which uncertainty can be explored strategically. Risk is no longer avoided automatically, but evaluated calmly. The separation does not happen suddenly. For many years, the lives of those who escape and those who remain look almost identical. The divergence becomes visible only later, when one path offers increasing choice and resilience, while the other demands constant effort to maintain position. Understanding these habits is not about blame. It is about clarity. Once the invisible limits of middle-class thinking become visible, the possibility of moving beyond them quietly emerges. Comfort plays a far larger role in keeping people within the middle class than most are willing to admit. Not luxury, not excess, but a steady level of comfort that removes urgency and softens ambition. When life works well enough, the pressure to rethink the system disappears. Stability begins to feel like success, even when it quietly limits future freedom. Middle-class comfort is built around predictability. Income arrives on schedule. Expenses are familiar. Routines repeat with little variation. This rhythm reduces stress and creates a sense of control. However, predictability also reduces exposure to situations that force growth. When outcomes are known in advance, learning slows, and adaptability weakens. Over time, this creates a lifestyle that is efficient but rigid. One of the most powerful effects of comfort is how it reshapes decision-making. Choices are evaluated based on how much they disrupt the current balance rather than how much they expand future options. A decision that introduces uncertainty, even if the downside is limited, is often rejected simply because it threatens comfort. This bias accumulates quietly, steering people away from opportunities that require patience or delayed gratification. Consider how free time is used. In comfortable systems, free time is primarily reserved for recovery and entertainment. There is nothing inherently wrong with this. The issue arises when all surplus energy is allocated to maintaining comfort rather than building capacity. Activities that could create long-term leverage, learning, experimenting, or building something slowly, are postponed indefinitely because they feel optional rather than necessary. Comfort also influences identity. People begin to define themselves through their routines and roles. "This is just how life works" becomes an unchallenged assumption. Questioning that assumption feels destabilizing. As a result, ambition is often reframed as unnecessary stress, and contentment becomes a shield against uncertainty. Over time, this mindset narrows the range of acceptable choices. Social dynamics reinforce this effect. Comfortable behavior is normalized and rewarded. Predictability is valued. Risk-taking, even when measured and thoughtful, is often viewed with skepticism. The desire to maintain social harmony subtly discourages deviation from established paths. Remaining within the middle class feels safe not only financially, but socially. Another overlooked factor is emotional insulation. Comfort reduces exposure to failure, but it also reduces exposure to growth. When setbacks are minimized, learning opportunities decrease. Individuals become skilled at maintaining equilibrium, but less practiced at adapting to change. This makes future transitions more difficult, reinforcing the preference for stability. Importantly, comfort does not disappear suddenly. It tightens gradually. Small concessions accumulate. Choices that prioritize ease over expansion become habitual. Over years, the system becomes self-reinforcing. The effort required to step outside it feels increasingly overwhelming, not because it is objectively harder, but because the capacity for discomfort has diminished. Those who eventually move beyond the middle class develop a different relationship with comfort. They do not reject it entirely, but they stop treating it as sacred. Temporary discomfort becomes acceptable when it serves a long-term purpose. Comfort is delayed strategically rather than pursued automatically. This shift is subtle, yet transformative. The difference is not in intelligence or effort, but in tolerance. The ability to sit with uncertainty, to delay reassurance, and to prioritize future flexibility over present ease gradually reshapes outcomes. Over time, this tolerance compounds, creating a widening gap between those who remain within comfortable systems and those who outgrow them. Understanding the role of comfort reframes the challenge entirely. Escaping the middle class is not about working harder or earning dramatically more. It is about resisting the quiet pull of systems designed to keep life manageable rather than expandable. Once this is recognized, comfort loses its grip, and intention begins to take its place. At some point, for those who begin to move beyond the limits of the middle class, the focus quietly shifts from comfort to control. This transition is subtle and rarely visible from the outside. Life may look the same for years. Income remains stable. Routines continue. Yet internally, the criteria for good decisions begins to change. Stability is no longer treated as the ultimate goal, but as a foundation for something more flexible. Control, in this context, does not mean rigid planning or constant oversight. It means reducing dependence on a single source of income, a single role, or a single outcome. Middle-class systems tend to concentrate risk, even while appearing safe. When all progress depends on one job, one schedule, or one economic environment, the system becomes vulnerable to disruption. True control emerges only when alternatives exist. This shift influences how money is allocated. Instead of being consumed primarily by lifestyle maintenance, resources are gradually directed toward assets, skills, and structures that continue to function without constant attention. The changes are rarely dramatic. Small reallocations compound quietly. Over time, they reshape the individual's financial architecture. Decision-making also becomes less reactive. Short-term fluctuations lose their emotional weight. Rather than responding immediately to changes in income or circumstance, decisions are evaluated through a longer lens. The question is no longer, does this feel safe right now, but, does this increase my ability to adapt later? This reframing reduces anxiety and increases strategic clarity. Another important shift involves patience. Those who remain within the middle class often require frequent confirmation that their choices are working. Progress must be visible and immediate. By contrast, individuals who build long-term leverage become comfortable operating without constant feedback. They accept periods of uncertainty, trusting that well-structured decisions will compound even when results are not immediately apparent. Time is treated differently as well. Instead of being fully absorbed by maintenance and recovery, portions of time are intentionally reserved for activities that expand future options. These efforts may not produce immediate income, but they build capacity. Over years, this capacity becomes a decisive advantage. Social dynamics also change. External validation becomes less important. Decisions are made based on internal alignment rather than comparison. This independence reduces pressure to conform and allows for more intentional paths. While this can feel isolating at first, it ultimately increases resilience. Emotionally, the relationship with money becomes calmer. Urgency fades. Fear-based decisions decrease. The individual is no longer forced to optimize every month for survival or comfort. This emotional stability reinforces consistency, allowing long-term strategies to unfold without interruption. Importantly, none of this requires extreme sacrifice or rejection of stability. The middle class provides a valuable base. The difference lies in how that base is used. Those who escape do not abandon structure. They leverage it. Discipline becomes a tool for expansion rather than mere preservation. Over time, the results of this shift become visible. Options multiply. Pressure decreases. The ability to say no increases. What once required constant effort now operates with less friction. The system begins to work for the individual rather than the other way around. This stage often goes unnoticed by others. From the outside, nothing appears extraordinary. Yet internally, a fundamental transformation has occurred. The individual is no longer trapped within the middle-class framework, even if they have not yet fully exited it. The trajectory has changed. This quiet shift, from comfort to control, from maintenance to leverage, is what ultimately separates those who remain from those who move beyond. It does not announce itself. It simply compounds. In the end, escaping the middle class is rarely about earning dramatically more or taking extreme risks. It is about orientation. Those who remain focus on maintaining balance and comfort, while those who move beyond focus on building control and flexibility over time. The difference is quiet, gradual, and often invisible for years. Stability protects the present, but leverage shapes the future. When discipline is paired with long-term intent, small decisions begin to compound in meaningful ways. What looks like patience becomes power, and what once felt like security becomes a platform rather than a ceiling.